Everyone, welcome to another edition of RotoWire TV. Mike Gottlieb, Jeff Erickson, hopefully man of leisure and leisure suits, Chris List will join us a little bit later on in the show. Got a lot to talk about today. I think the first thing we're going to do, Mike, is talk a little bit about what's happened over the past weekend. We're talking about all the various roster moves. What did we learn? What sort of things, how does it affect our fantasy draft strategy? There's not too many huge fancy implications, but the big one has to be out of Pittsburgh, and it affects you directly.
Yes, actually. So I drafted Jonathan Dwyer in the Google Plus Fantasy Football Central expert draft, and he is now without a job. So I feel really good about my draft so far, and Jonathan Dwyer is just the personification of that awesome draft that I've had.
Yeah, and no, that's fine though. We all have our little missteps, and I heard I was doing a draft Thursday night, and a buddy of mine in that league is a Steelers fan. He goes, "Dwyer's going to get cut." Hey, he knew it. So, I saved myself a pick, but I also didn't jump all over Isaac Redman because I didn't really believe in him either. Now I missed out on a chance to snag him a little bit later on in this same league, but. Are you buying into Isaac Redman at least for week 1, week 2?
Not really. He may do a little bit, but I just don't. I don't see. There's no breakout value in him at least. He like a closer. He has a job, but he may have a lower end closing job in terms that you like to discuss with running backs. Yes, he has the job, but he's by no means elite at the position, nor someone who you should expect to be your running back 1 option, for example.
Right, exactly, and in this week, his first week, they draw Tennessee, which isn't that bad of a matchup at least. But maybe Redmond and Felix Jones and LaRod Stevens-Howling are going to be one of those annoying committees, and so it could be the correct answer. Could be none of the above, and it still might be even after Le'Veon Bell returns.
Yeah, and my big thing, especially with LaRod Stevens-Howling there, is Redmond going to be all 3 downs? Is he just a first down, second down, or is he going to be more of a committee? It's something that we've yet to see, and I'm not going to roll out with Isaac Redmond with a lot of excitement, not knowing exactly if he's going to get the lion's share of the carries at first.
Right, exactly, and that's definitely a tough consideration there. And let's also factor in the Pittsburgh offensive line. If you look at RotoWire's online, offensive lineman grid, Sean Raposa does that. You can see that he's got them ranked 31st among all NFL offensive lines. They were awful last year, and then they had a lot of injuries. They had a lot of guys. A lot of guys that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, not a problem. But no, they definitely had injuries last year as well. There was a guy the guy from Stanford last year that went in the draft that the Pittsburgh drafted first overall. God, the name is escaping me right now, but he was the quintessential Pittsburgh running offensive lineman, and I wanted my Chargers to draft him because the Chargers are probably the number 32 ranked offensive line, if I'm not mistaken. But him getting injured last year really led to the start of the downfall of the Pittsburgh offensive line, and it didn't get much better over the offseason, so you're right, it's probably not going to get much better, but also Ben Roethlisberger holds on to the ball a really long time, so those offensive line rankings, if they take sacks into account, that's really one of the pitfalls. A guy like Tebow we'll get to him in a second, but a guy like Tebow or Roethlisberger who holds the ball for a very long time can really skew those rankings because he's just holding on to the ball too long.
Right, exactly. And you look at him, and Maurice Pouncey is like their only. Maurice Pouncey is their only reliable guy. David DeCastro, who's you're thinking of.
That's the name. Yes, thank you. But
he's the one that he's got potential at least, right?
Yeah, and he is a Pittsburgh Steelers offensive lineman. He is mean, and he loves to block people and loves to block people effectively and hard. He's going to hit. If he hits you, you know it. So that kind of grit on the offensive line is what they were lacking last year, and especially in the run game. I think DeCastro can really make a big difference if he returns to the health that he was 2 years ago in his last year at Stanford.
Right. And so that's definitely an issue there as far as that goes. So, there's a lot going on with that. Let's talk about the Denver running back situation. They released the depth chart. It's really no different than it was in training camp. Ronnie Hillman's listed as the starter. Monte Ball is listed second. Noshawn Moreno is listed third. They've said all 3 will play, though. It's like first on the depth chart, but not first in our hearts.
Yes, it's like Shane Falco, but in reverse. But it's the only problem with it's like Mike Shanahan still running that team. You have no idea week to week who is going to be the running back star. I'm not drafting any of them highly if you're still drafting, and if you're starting any of them, I'm not starting them with any confidence because the first mistake by any of the three and the other two move right up and they take all the spots. So all three of them have shown a propensity to make mistakes. So at the end of the day, it's just going to be a committee, at least at first.
Yeah, it might very well be, and I've got Ball in the NFFC, so I'm kind of hoping that he's the one. I still believe at the end of the day he's the best ball carrier.
Yeah.
But what does that mean? I don't know. It's John Fox isn't necessarily a guy that doles out playing time to rookies that readily. So I'm not exactly entirely optimistic, and I feel like I made a misstep there perhaps. That team is a little bit in trouble right now because I also have Le'Veon Bell. And I've got a couple other question marks, some handcuffs behind there, but not of those teams. Just it's going to be interesting to see if I can scramble. We'll be definitely trolling the waiver wire pretty closely there in the first couple of weeks of the season.
Yeah, and as far as the Denver running back situation goes, again, if you're looking at keeper values, I'd rank it. Obviously Monty Ball would be the highest among all of them. If you're in a keeper league, that would be the way that I'd go first. Then maybe Hillman, then Moreno. But it's such a bad situation short term that to guess on it long term, it can really burn you at the end.
Well, and it also depends on your format too. If you're only keeping one or two players, keeper consideration's nothing. If you're in a league where you keep 10 players, yeah, sure, okay, that's a big deal. And I've seen both. I've seen some that keep 15. That's definitely another way of doing that there. I actually don't play in any keeper leagues, so it's just a non-issue for me. How about you? Do you play in any keeper leagues?
I just started one for my home league. Just became a keeper league this year. Monty Ball was drafted, I believe, in the 6th round of this draft, 14 team. And now we can actually welcome in Chris Liss as well, one of our other senior NFL editors. Chris, we're talking about the Denver running back situation. Your guess is probably a little better than mine, but as far as values, short term, long term, how do you rank the 3 running backs in Denver?
Well, I think we've kind of had it this way for the last month, and it's been number 1 Ball, probably in the mid-20s, around 25th overall. Then Moreno around late 30s, like 37 to 40ish range among running backs, and then Hillman around 50. I know it sounds crazy because Hillman on a lot of depth charts is the number 1 guy, but it just seems like they don't take him seriously. They bypassed him for Moreno last year down the stretch. They could have used Hillman. They used Moreno instead. And they drafted Monty Ball, and Hillman was a 2nd-round pick last year. So if they had any faith in him, I don't know why they would have, gone to Moreno last year and drafted Ball. So I rate them that way. Obviously, Ball needs to be able to protect Peyton Manning, but the fact that they didn't go out and give Moreno the job already means that I think they do believe that Ball will develop well enough. So Monty Ball's a top 25 guy and has upside to be top 10.
And we were also talking. Jeff was saying that he's in no keeper or dynasty leagues. Are you in any of those formats, keeper leagues or dynasty leagues?
I am not. The thing about football is, the values of players in a 1-year league is pretty similar to the value of a player in a dynasty league. Like if you were to look at the top 10 list in a dynasty for running backs, Peterson might be number 1. Now, how could that possibly be, given that he's been in the league 7 years? And already has had a major knee injury. Well, it's just that running backs' shelf lives are so short that if you think Peterson's going to be the best back for this year or next, that's good enough for a keeper league. So the only guys that really matter in a keeper league are a couple rookie receivers and tight ends that might develop over time, and quarterbacks. When you say about running backs and most receivers, most tight ends, the 1-year rankings and the keeper rankings are just about the same.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd also say that I don't know. I played in a dynasty league before. I played in a keeper league before. It can be fun. I think if you have, I think it's one thing if you have salaries, and then I think there's some value to it. But just straight up draft picks, I don't know. If you're doing an auction league and you've got salaries, then I think there's a way to make it fun. Otherwise, I'm not even a big fan of keeper leagues. And even in the salary one, I don't know. I lost a little bit of interest in that format over time. I think it's the thrill about fantasy football is the draft. I mean, that's part of the most fun activity you can do, and anything that takes away from that, I'm hesitant to participate in. I think it's different in baseball. I like the concept of building a dynasty and grabbing these guys before they have a lot of value. You don't really get that much of a chance unless you're going mega deep in football.
Yeah, with the lack, there's no minor league system where guys can develop. They either sit on the bench or they play. So that I can understand that argument. The one wrinkle that I put in the home league that I'm in that we do is we have 3 keepers in a snake draft, but you can't draft anyone in the first 3 rounds. So the marquee guys are actually going to be in the draft every single year. So if you are trying to grab those younger guys later, and it's the same concept as baseball in that regard, where you're trying to get developing players that you don't have to pay a premium for necessarily in the draft, but you'd still be able to get to hold on to them and possibly draft one of the other marquee guys every year and try to couple them together and really build something there. But
right.
Just to suggest, trying to make it more like baseball in that regard, where you do have to pay attention to the young guys as well if you want to get value. And additionally, someone who I picked up in that league who's going to have a ton of value for me is I picked up Percy Harvin in the 13th round, a guy who's normally not even thought about in most drafts as someone who's going to be a very valuable asset to me in this league. But just to bring Chris back in here for a second, just to recap the Pittsburgh when Pittsburgh cutting Jonathan Dwyer. Do you feel that gives Ike Redmond any kind of big boost for you, or is it something that it's just Ike Redmond still?
I mean, it gives him a short-term boost. He could be good for a month. I think Le'Veon Bell should be back by the end of September. Now, there's obviously a chance for a setback, in which case all bets are off. Felix Jones could have a bigger role. I mean, who knows? LaRod Stevens-Howland could have a role. Right now, I would have Redmond getting 15 or so carries in the first week against Tennessee, which I think will be useful. But I don't, it's hard to get excited about any of the Steelers running backs right now. I think long term, in the season, I think Le'Veon Bell has probably about as good a chance as Redmond to get the most to lead the Steelers in rushing yards.
Gotcha. And then does the Pittsburgh offensive line concern you at all regarding the running game? Would that lead you to believe that none of them are actually going to do very well?
I mean, I don't know that it's that. I don't know why people keep saying it's so bad. I know a couple of years ago it was terrible, but last year Heath Miller, who is one of the best blocking tight ends in all of football, ended up being one of the best pass-catching tight ends because they were able to send him out in patterns. Something they, for a couple of years they didn't even do because they needed his help on the line. So I'm not sure how horrible the line is going to be. In the passing game it's a little different because Ben Roethlisberger is so good at buying time and shaking off rushers that he actually gets more time for his receivers to get open. Run blocking is sort of like the secondary thing in the NFL these days, but I'm not sure that their offensive line is necessarily going to be bad.
Gotcha. So both Jeff and Chris, were there any other cuts or any other roster moves made that kind of piqued your interest at all, or was it just the Pittsburgh running back situation and then also a little bit of clarity to the Denver running back situation?
In terms of fantasy potential, not really too much that happened that really kind of piqued my interest. I think in real life, seeing the Cleveland Browns decide the last second they don't want Shane Graham as their kicker. We'll figure out something on Tuesday. They're taking, like Chris said, I'm going to steal his line. They're taking the fantasy approach here. They're taking a kicker, as the very last round. Green Bay cutting Vince Young and Graham Harrell. That they're kind of going with the free market as their backup quarterback again. They're assuming like, hey, Aaron Rodgers is our guy, and we're never going to use our backup unless there's a catastrophe. We don't want to spend any extra dollars above the league minimum to have a backup quarterback. Well, there you go, and they'll just take what's out there on the market. So I found that a little bit interesting, but neither of those things really shape our fantasy opinions.
But it is funny that that's also a very viable fantasy strategy. Draft one quarterback, use the waiver wire, and why ever roster something that's replacement value? I mean, why use a spot that could be used for depth at safety or something you might need during a game where it's replacement? And I can understand, like, if you have a particular system, you might want a guy in practice who learns that system and is ready to go. But, I mean, let's be honest. If Aaron Rodgers is out for a significant amount of time, it's over for the Packers. So it's kind of like, does it really even matter? So I actually like that. I was surprised to see that a great college quarterback got cut, and it's a very big deal. It's sad what happened to his pro career is Vince Young. I really thought Vince Young was going to be awesome, and sad to see such a great college quarterback get cut on cutdown day.
Yeah, I knew you were going with the not Tim Tebow line there. I knew exactly where you're going with that. I was going to see how clever you're going to try to be with it there. If you're going to kind of go with like, Chris Sims won a backup job or something like that.
What else was there? I don't know.
Well, I mean, I was a little intrigued because with Tim Tebow especially, I thought that Belichick would try to make him into like an H-back or to had that convincing way with Tim Tebow that hey, you're not a quarterback, and if I can't do it, nobody can type approach. And apparently that's not the case. He was just trying to be a quarterback. He took about 3 sacks a game, and there he goes. He's back in free agency. I don't know if anyone else is going to really pick him up and try to use him as a quarterback. Do you guys see him coming back at all as a quarterback?
In the NFL?
I'd like to see him as like a left tackle, take some roids, beef up a little bit. Yeah, add about 40 pounds. I mean, he's 240. He got to 280. He's got a good work ethic. I mean, I love the work ethic thing. He works hard. He's in great shape. He takes care of himself. I mean, you should be able to play anything. I mean, play left tackle. Just put on about 40 pounds of muscle. Maybe he could play linebacker. He'd have to be drilling people and hurting them. I don't know if he can kind of do that given his belief system. If that's okay to be being on the attack, trying to hurt people. But I'm not sure. It's NFL is hard. And if you train to be a quarterback your whole life and you can't make it in the NFL, like. It's not like the guy that you're competing with, the linebacker or safety, is some scrub. He's a guy who's a great athlete who's training his whole life to do that. So it seems like Tebow's a good athlete and you can just do whatever, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah, Vince Young was a better athlete for crying out loud.
Absolutely.
So I want to see that decision be treated on the same level as John Skelton getting cut because face it, they're basically the same level of quarterback right now. Go to Canada, get some reps. That's anyhow. But let's use that as a launch to talk about the Patriots real quick here because they got this great matchup here in Week 1 against Buffalo. At least on paper, compared to our past conceptions of Buffalo, who knows really how good Buffalo's defense is this year? But Buddy's got all this new personnel. Gronk probably won't play. We know Hernandez won't play. We know that Wes Welker is gone. So it's Amendola. It's these rookies. It's maybe Edelman and throwing to the backs a lot. What do you expect out of this week?
I think they're going to roll. I don't know if they're going to. I don't know if their defense. If EJ Manuel plays, I don't think that the Patriots' defense is. It's pretty bad, and Manuel looked good in preseason. I think he could probably actually have a decent game. But even though he may be rusty, so that's the other side of that. But I think the Patriots' offense is going to be fine. I mean, they've been practicing every day all summer with I think Pianowski put it in the breakfast table on RotoWire that he said. Brady's a top 5 all-time quarterback. Where you put him in that top 5, you can make any argument from 1 to 5. But he's in that top 5. So you've got that guy. Yes, it would be nice to have Gronkowski, but these guys have been practicing all summer to get open, to find a way to make plays. And the offensive line is still above average. The running back pool, the staple they have, is well above average. And so, Amendola is a polished professional receiver who's not hurt so far as we know at this time. So I don't really see a huge transition period for them. I think they're going to be pretty smooth from the get-go. I think one of the things the Patriots have done in recent years is a lot of misdirection. The one time you saw it really get stymied was against the Jets in that playoff game, and last year against the Ravens it didn't work that much. But they'll always throw to a guy you don't expect, hand it off, end around to some guy you don't expect. They've always got the defense off balance, and Brady is just execute things so well, works so hard, has everything so tight in the system that I'd start your key Patriots that you expect to get the ball.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also look at the one thing they did do is they did waive a couple veteran tight ends that were kind of competing to do the fill-in for Gronk while Gronk's out role. Instead, left that role to Zach Sudfeld. And
yes, they did.
The guy with the Rams, Honolulu or whatever you want to pronounce his name, but iChart. I think it's interesting that. That to me that's probably a pretty decent indication that Gronk's coming back sooner rather than later, even if it's not Week 1, maybe not even Week 2, but it could be. It's interesting they kind of went that route.
Yeah, and logic would dictate that they would play it safer with Gronk because he's a future piece, and they did not put him on the PUP list, which says to me that it's going to be closer to 1 than it is to 6 as far as how many weeks he's going to be out. So my feeling is, the first 2 or 3 games you may not see him, or you may see him in a limited role, and they may ease him back in. But my view of the Patriots offense has always been that outside of Randy Moss and Wes Welker, it has been a revolving door as far as wide receivers are concerned. And even Troy Brown at the age of 503 was still relevant when he was on the team because Brady is that good. So if you decide to draft, Kembrell Tompkins or Aaron Dobson, Aaron Dobson's more of a flyer guy, but I would start Kembrell Tompkins with a decent amount of confidence if he's really going to be lining up every down with Tom Brady because Tom Brady's just that good.
Yeah, the funny thing is Welker was nobody before he came to the Patriots. He was a kick return guy who was, a slot guy. And then Randy Moss, as great as he was a dud for 2 years before he got to the Patriots. So, and then a dud right after he left. So, obviously there was a few years there, so he got a lot older. But it's not like they even spent money on those guys. Those guys were dirt cheap when they picked him up. I think they got Moss for a 4th rounder, and they got Welker, I think, off the scrap heap. So, Amendola is actually the most sort of prized guy they've signed.
Yeah.
I guess Brandon Lloyd last year and Chad Ochocinco the year before that, and those were total busts.
Right.
But if a guy can fit into the system and a guy, is willing to do, what's asked of them, usually, they do have some success in that system.
They have kind of whiffed on some draft picks, though, in the recent last 3-4 years as they've tried to supplement that. And, that's why you kind of worry. They spent, these 3 draft picks on wide receivers in this draft, but, who knows? It looks like Tompkins has looked good so far. Dobson's the one who was the earlier pick. And, I hesitate. I think Dobson's getting way undervalued right now. I saw one league where he went undrafted, another where he was, 2nd or 3rd to last round going. I know Tompkins ahead of him right now, but I think the emphasis should be right now. This is one of those classic cases where it could be overrating the preseason just a little bit.
Yeah, and especially with the Patriots, the number one guy is whoever's open. It's that simple. Tom Brady is going to get it to the guy who's open, and that also segues into a guy who I wanted to talk about too, is Shane Vereen. Especially in point per reception leagues, he may have a significant role to play in this offense if he's going to be lining up more often, especially in passing situations. I think he can actually have a pretty nice role too for where he's being drafted.
Oh, no doubt.
I want to say a couple things about Shane Vereen, Reggie Bush, Matt Forte a little less for Forte, but Shane Vereen, Reggie Bush, a little bit of Sproles. Man, I do not trust these PPR guys. They could be huge or they could be nothing. If you tell me,
he's leaving us in suspense. So we'll get back to what Chris was trying to say about Shane Vereen and the other guys. I'm sure it's going to be positive, like he always is. But Chris,
hang on. I heard Chris. What he was going on. It was all feast or famine. Is that it could be all or nothing. Go ahead, Chris. Try it again.
Sorry, Chris.
Let me see if it's just Time Warner Cable's internet, by the way, just so you know. If any complaints, take it to them. It's really horrific having that as my internet provider. Go ahead.
No, I was saying
I can't hear you, Mike. You and I are some sort of delay, but the point. Oh, yeah, I still couldn't hear you. But the point is, these guys like Reggie Bush, Shane Vereen. If you told me that Shane Vereen finished the 2 yards rushing and 9 total touchdowns, I'd believe you. If you told me he finished the year with 400 rushing yards and 30 catches for 320 receiving yards, I'd believe you. Reggie Bush, I could see him getting 90, 100 catches. I could also see him getting 46 catches and missing 6 games. These guys, to me, especially Bush, who you got to use like a late first, early second round pick on now in a PPR league. I just have no idea. What these guys are going to do, how many touchdowns they're going to score. It's great to have a guy that's just like, okay, Trent Richardson, if he's healthy, he's going to get 10 touchdowns. He's going to catch 40 to 50 passes. He's going to get, 1,000 to 1,300, maybe 1,400 yards. You just know that. It's a narrow range. These PPR guys, I have no idea. I can easily see Reggie Bush being a top 10 back, but I really have a hard time taking him there. I just don't trust him. And Vereen is obviously more of a 5th round guy. But again, the idea that somehow he's going to be the receiver that's making up for some of Welker or some of Brandon Lloyd or some of Gronk's or Hernandez's targets. I mean, he's a running back. I have no idea how they're going to use him, and it's just complete speculation whether he can fill some of that void or not. Whether it's going to go deeper into like a Dobson or Campbell Tompkins is really going to be the guy that we think he is, or Sudfeld is going to have a big role. Whether it's those guys or they use a different position in Vereen, I have no idea.
So, Chris, rank these three guys, these that are consistently second-round picks: Darren Sproles, Reggie Bush, and Maurice Jones-Drew in a PPR league. Who would you draft first?
Jones-Drew 1, Bush 2nd, Sproles 3rd. Sproles, I mean, obviously in a PPR league he's got a lot of value, but like in a non-PPR he's borderline undraftable in a 12-team league.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets like 80 carries in the whole season. Okay, he can't get more than 400 yards, and then he gets 90 catches for 700 yards or whatever, 75 catches for 700 yards, but like he got 7 touchdowns the last couple of years. Could he get 4 this year? Yeah, he could. It's not like he's some posting up people on fades, and it's not like he's running fly patterns down the field. He's got to take these little swing passes in. It's hard to do that. So Sproles to me, if he gets 85 catches or 80 catches or even 75 in a PPR, he's going to have good value. But I just want a guy who's going to get some touchdowns and going to get 175 carries at least. So that's why I like Bush better than him. And Maurice Jones-Drew could get 300 carries and also catch 40, 45 passes.
Jeff, same for you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that order. In fact, MJD's. I think it's not even close that he's way ahead of those guys. Because
most people have Bush higher than MJD in PPR. You know that, Jeff.
Yeah,
I understand that,
but
I don't think most people draft Sproles ahead of. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, in the Fantasy Football Central League, both Sproles and Bush went way before.
Staying corrected then. I don't know my market as well as I thought I did, but.
I think MJD on the whole, on average, is ahead of Sproles, but I'm positive Bush is ahead of both.
Yeah, well, because Bush has looked, again, classic preseason overreaction. Bush has looked dynamic in the preseason. They've also used him a lot more than these other guys have. I mean, because, I'm not really quite sure why. Well, for one, Calvin didn't play, and I guess they just were trying to acclimate him to the offense. But I don't know. It just seems like, this is like the equivalent of spring training, and he looks good in it there, but I think we put too much emphasis sometimes on that. We always talk about it, the preseason means nothing, but then you see the ADPs change accordingly anyhow. You see everyone saying, hey, you can cut LaMichael James now because he's going to miss 3 weeks and he hasn't looked good early on in the preseason. You know what? He's still the same sort of dynamic guy that could be huge in the second half now. Now, if you only have 4 or 5 bench spots, yeah, cut him. But if you got 6 to 8 bench spots, I still think he's got some value, and he's going undrafted now in these leagues.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that transitions nicely. I do actually want to talk about the 49ers because they cut a veteran wide receiver this week in Austin Collie, and that leaves Anquan Bolden and everybody else not named Michael Crabtree for wide receivers in San Francisco. And then additionally, how much stock do you put into Kendall Hunter, who's obviously going to be the number 2 for now, but then when LaMichael James comes back, do you feel like, LaMichael James will pass him on the depth chart, or is Kendall Hunter still going to be involved?
I think Hunter is the number 2, and that's what they've decided even before James got hurt. So right now, I think he's still the guy to own. I mean, I think Gore could still have another good year. Their offensive line is very good, and Gore is healthy for now. I think Hunter will get the second crack. He's also coming off a pretty serious injury. Seems like he's recovered from it, but LaMichael James, as Jeff said, is still going to be running when he gets a chance behind the best offensive line in football, arguably. He's still the fastest back by far that they have, and he's even put on a little muscle to be better in between the tackles runner. So, they used him toward the end of the season when Hunter was hurt and in the playoffs, and I think there's still a chance he's good. It's tough to see a guy, who's 3rd on the depth chart. It's tough to bank on that. You have to really just kind of stash him and hope. It's kind of like Christine Michael. As good as he looks, is he 2nd or 3rd on the depth chart? I'm not quite sure. And you're kind of hoping for a couple things to happen. I know he looked good in the preseason, better than James. So, and wide receiver, I think Quentin Patton's going to be the guy. I think he's just had a good preseason. They liked him from the beginning. They said A.J. Jenkins packing, maybe John Baldwin because of his size and his pedigree gets a chance. But I think Harbaugh's the type of guy who likes the hardworking rookie and over the sort of lazy veteran or the veteran who doesn't necessarily fit in. And So from day one, he's like Patton, and he's shown that he's willing to take a chance on players like Kaepernick, and I think Patton's kind of an interesting sleeper.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think Marlon Moore still might be in that picture too a little bit, but he doesn't have the same sort of ceiling as Patton does. But yeah, and I think it's interesting. I'm playing in one best ball league, and I'm still going to take a swing for the fences on the Michael James and Christine Michael type of guys, just because I kind of feel like if Turbin or Hunter gets the job, they're going to end up sharing it anyhow. I just don't view them as like home run type of guys, whereas I think James and Michael might be.
Here's a question that I think is interesting. Is okay, so you have a preseason battle between like Hunter and James or Michael and Turbin, and maybe Michael and Turbin is harder to say because Michael looks so good in the preseason. But you have a preseason battle where one guy wins and the other guy loses, and so you think it's set. But then during the regular season, that flip flops. One guy plays better when he's put in. How often does that happen? I mean, how often, or put differently, how often is it that when two guys who were both viable or competing for a backup job, how often is it the preseason just kind of settles it once and for all, and how often is it that this is still a competition ongoing all season long?
I think it happens all the time. Yeah. I think you could even stretch it even farther. I think in some cases, if you've had a job battle to see who's going to be the starter, if it's an actual battle and not like a nominal first string guy and nominal second string guy, yeah, it could flip all the time. I mean, a guy has a bad game, a bad series, he puts the ball on the ground one time, roles change. Happens all the time in the NFL. Happens in baseball all the time. We see these spring training job battles, and then 2 weeks into the season, it gets reversed. A guy gets sent down.
Now, is it a bigger deal, or like, because I think about like the Dobson Kimbrel Tompkins battle that
right.
Tompkins seems to have won. Dobson's the best. He's faster. He was a higher draft pick, and they have more invested in him. And so, we were just talking about how Dobson's so cheap now. He's like not even drafted. But sometimes, you lose out in preseason, and the other guy never gets a chance. He's just, obviously a fumble or an injury changes that in a hurry. But if the other guy's just okay, and then it's not till like week 12 where somebody gets hurt and you realize the second guy was way better than him.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure that's certainly possible. And one thing we do fall into a trap, and it's almost like I'm contradicting myself in the James thing a little bit. Bear with me. That we get caught up into the should win it versus the is winning it thing. And I think it's one thing that it's kind of I think it's arrogant to think that we know more than the coaching staff that's watching him every day in practice. Say this guy should win the job. I don't know what they're doing thinking about giving him this guy the job. I mean, presumably, the professional coaches, they have a level of competence, and we just like to take a look from afar and say we'd like this to happen, but we don't really know what's really going on. And maybe it's because of blocking for blitz pickup, and they value that more. They're afraid of something, but I think we're too quick to say, hey, this coach is an idiot, and the real thing is, hey, this guy hasn't shown it, and therefore he lost the job.
Yeah. That actually, so thinking about the should versus the is, that actually kind of translates nicely into going into the regular season now, because now that we're really in the is part of fantasy football, no longer saying this should happen, this is happening now. So with waiver wires, because now that most people have drafted their leagues by now, how active are you on the waiver wire before the season starts? If you have a fab budget or if you have like a high waiver priority, are you going through it now, or are you going to wait till the season starts and start reacting in that regard and competing against everybody else?
Well, you're going to look at what's there.
Go ahead, Chris.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Sorry. I was just going to say, you look in like the earlier you draft, the more active you're going to be now. Every year is different. A lot of times, if you had an early draft at the start of training camp, or God forbid, like we did in Vegas and during the All-Star break, there's going to be a lot of injuries, and you need to just fill those holes. I found this preseason to be unique, that I haven't seen too many guys, and I'm like falling all over myself to try to get. Like I got Julian Thomas in the Stokel law firm. Like I was happy with that. There's a bidding war on Terrell Pryor, but that was almost all entirely spec. We haven't really seen like, this guy has won the starting running back job, and he wasn't on any. We don't have an Alfred Morris yet.
Yeah.
There's no one to get excited about. I mean, Kimbrel Tompkins, I'm not super excited about him. I saw this thing on Yahoo. Pianowski was asking, where do you rank Kimbrel Tompkins? I think his ADP is 43. I'm at 45. I'm like right in the middle. I see the possibility that he could be good. I don't see he's not very fast. Gronk is probably coming back in a couple weeks. That's going to be their dominant red zone guy. They have Amendola. He's going to dominate the targets. They have a lot of running backs. To me, this undrafted free agent receiver could be good, but I'm just not excited to go get him, and that's probably the best guy. I know in the Stovall Law Firm League, I got Alshon Jeffrey. He was available. I thought, Marshall's a little dinged up with the hip still, and Jeffrey's looked really good in camp. It's year 2. I like him, but it's not like, I had Dustin Keller to drop. I mean, it was an easy call. Am I excited about it? No. So there really hasn't been anybody, and I like that. I don't like that feeling like, okay, there's just one guy, and I have to bid half my budget right now to go get him. And if it was Alfred Morris, you should have bid more than half your budget, and you would have been rewarded for that. But I don't like that. I kind of like it that not much has happened. We're going with the teams we drafted, and we're gonna have to wait till the season. It's a little more balanced to me than having to go and drop half your fab before the season even starts.
And how do you guys treat your fab budgets? I mean, are you one of those guys who will spend more than half your fab budget on one guy early on in the season, or are you more of the, let's try to stretch out this fab budget for the whole season and see what we can do?
I think it all depends on the scenario, but yeah, I will. If there's an Alfred Morris type, there's a guy that gets our Peyton Hillis a few years ago when he got the job for Cleveland. Yeah, I'll go ahead and spend it because you never know when that guy that you're going to get for the extent of the season, is going to get that starting job, you go for it there. And it's such a huge impact to get him now instead of getting some guy in week 9. Now, I will play small ball in some other leagues if I don't see that one dominant guy. I'm not afraid to spend 5 here, 7 there, another 10% there. I think that's also a viable approach. But if you've got that one guy that stands out, like, hey, he's going to have the job and he looks good doing it, yeah, go be aggressive.
Yeah, but it's easy to say the Alfred Morris now, right? I mean, at the time.
No, but I don't think so. Actually,
Really? Come on, Mike Shanahan with his running backs, and every week he chooses a new guy normally.
Yeah. Okay. Peyton Hillis was a pretty good one, though. I mean, if you doubted him early on, you missed out.
Obviously somebody spent the most on both of those guys, and it was a great decision when they did it. But there's way more those situations where the guy's just totally worthless. That they spend the big bucks on the guy that was named the starter yesterday, and he, has one mediocre game, and then he's either injured or he sucks and he gets replaced. It happens all the time.
Yeah, I guess.
I'm not saying we shouldn't go big on those guys if you really have a feel for it, or what you're reading and observing seems to make sense. I'm just saying that those guys, the Alfred Morris is easy to see in retrospect. It's very hard to see prospectively that he had anything close to that kind of upside at the time. I think generally during the season, the key is to get everybody a week early, okay? And so instead of waiting till the guy gets the job, has the 150-yard game and 2 touchdowns, now everybody's breaking the bank to go get him. You want to say, okay, who's a little shaky? What running back's a little shaky, and who's got a backup that maybe has some talent. There's maybe a third guy there, so he's even super cheap. He's on nobody's radar. I'll pick him up for free on the first come, first serve and hang on to him. And in a week or 2, that's the guy that blows up. You want to just try to get a week ahead. Now, of course, that's really hard to do, but to me, that's the most winning way, because if you blow your entire budget on one guy, if it's Alfred Morris, it's well spent. But most of the time, it's not, and then you have trouble addressing smaller problems that come up during the season. So ideally, you want to try to think a week ahead or 2 weeks ahead, and just have sort of the guys on your bench that might become the next big guy, and not spend a lot for him.
All right.
Yeah. So that basically, and then also on the flip side, if you're in a waiver system where it's transactional, so if you have the first priority versus the other guy who has 12th, based on standings and it reverses every week, if you have the first priority waiver, are you more likely just to do you not value that, just like how you don't value bye weeks? You just deal with it when it happens. And if you have that first priority, you want to make sure that it's a running back, or is it a case where whoever's there, I'm taking them. I don't care if it's the number 1 waiver priority.
I'm spending it more often than not. If there's something I need, and we're going through the waivers process, and he's not going to get through the waivers process, just use it. Because you're not going to be the only person using your waiver, first of all. So you may lose that priority, but it's going to cycle back eventually. That or your team's going to be good. So whatever, boo-hoo. I use it. I think it's a bigger mistake to hold on to that priority in baseball. In football, you can see it if you want to hold out for a guy that you know, like a running back injury, and you know that you can get the backup, that's fine. That's one thing. But that perfect storm doesn't happen that often. So just get the guy you need.
I think if you have the number one priority in football and you can keep it week to week, you can wait a couple weeks to try to get a good score. You don't want to wait too long, but I'd say 3 weeks is okay to try to wait for some big injury to happen where there's someone huge on the waiver wire. But if it's number 3 or number 2 or number 5, I mean, you just want to use it quickly. And it depends how your league is structured. I mean, I wouldn't hold on to the number one waiver if there's no first come, first serve, because, then if you do that, then you can't. You have to be able to make small moves. But I could understand holding on to it, to get a big score. But if you're anything lower than that, and once you're, at the bottom, it's kind of a luxury. You don't have to worry about it. You just put in for everybody. You're never having to worry about your waiver status.
Gotcha. Perfect. And so now we've discussed waivers, it's really time to start really getting into the nitty-gritty of the season now. Start looking ahead to week 1. Only, 3 days away, Thursday, September 5th. Ravens play the Broncos. What are you guys looking for from this matchup?
I think the Ravens, who are getting 7.5 to 9 points, depending on what sportsbook you look, are a little bit underrated right now. I don't know why. They lost some key, some Hall of Fame guys, Ned Reed and Ray Lewis, but and Anquan Bolden was a very nice, second receiver. But I mean, those guys were super old, and Ladarius Webb, who is a Pro Bowl level corner, is at least as good as any one of those guys, if not better. And I don't doubt John Harbaugh's ability to find talent to get it in the right position to succeed. And it's still a veteran team with star defensive players like Terrell Suggs and Haloti Ngata, and a good offensive line and a good running game, and a game, sort of a deep threat in Torrey Smith. I think it's a good team still, and I think they're going to put up some points against Denver in Denver with Von Miller out. I think this is going to be competitive game, and there's going to be he scored 28 to 24 Denver or something like that, but there's going to be plenty of fantasy points to go around.
I'd agree with that, and the lines kind of reflect that too. If I recall that the the over/under on this Denver-Baltimore game is something on the order of like 53%, 53 points or something like that. It's pretty high. I think it's one of like the 3 or 4 top highest lines out there in terms of the over/under. So yeah, I expect it to be pretty high scoring too. My first instinct was that Baltimore's defense has gone down, and that was more a reflection of last regular season, but. Maybe they'll be better because they're younger. I think that sometimes we might overvalue like the name leaving, like you kind of suggested. Those guys are old, and the Bengals got better when they got younger. And I think this, I just don't see Baltimore making bad decisions that often. I see Ozzie Newsome making a lot of smart decisions. So maybe that defense will be a little bit better. And still, it'll be a tough place. On Thursday night in Denver. Nice little diss, by the way. You can thank Peter Angelos for this. If I recall right, he wasn't willing to move the Orioles game on that particular day so that they wouldn't be playing at the same time. So therefore they put Denver on the road. Defending Super Bowl champ having to go on the road and playing a tough rival.
Baltimore. Yeah.
Did I say? I thought I said playing Denver on the road.
Oh yes. You're right. But yes, Baltimore is opening up on the road, which is a nice way to not give the fans what they want to see their Super Bowl champs in Week 1. So good job by all the people in Baltimore. And what I'm looking at right now is the 48 on the over/under, and then minus. Okay. Yeah, and then it's still pretty high. And then -8 for Denver currently is the consensus that I'm looking at right now. Quick picks for you guys. You taking Baltimore +8? It sounds like both of you.
I think I'll look at it. It's almost like a sucker line. Like it's such a big line against the defending Super Bowl champ that you think the public is going to be on Baltimore and the sharps are going to be on Denver. I mean, doesn't it seem like that, Jeff? That like the sharp play is Denver. That everyone's going to be like +8 on the guys who won the Super Bowl, or it could be like, Denver's loaded. They got Wes Welker. Who cares? But people care. And Baltimore's lost Ray Lewis. He's the best player ever. They lost Ed Reed. So I don't know like which way it's playing. It almost seems though like. For me, like a basic thing would be like they just won the Super Bowl and they're getting 8. Give me the underdog. I think if you get rid of all the psychology of it and why they set the line, I'm still going to take Baltimore. I'll be the sucker. I feel like, I think this should be a 4.5, 5, 6 maybe at most. I think we're giving Denver way too much credit, especially without Von Miller. He's their second best player.
Right, exactly. And the only thing is, like, this is a carryover from last season's line. Though Denver was a prohibitive favorite in the playoffs. They were a number 2 seed. I mean, they were considered to be a big favorite in this. Yeah, exactly.
How'd that work out in that game?
But you know what? Denver would have won that game if their stupid defensive back didn't fall down on essentially a Hail Mary.
Denver had 2 return touchdowns.
True.
Yeah, that's true.
In that game, see, the fact that they were even at that point was because Denver had 2 kick return. Trindon Holiday had 2 kick return touchdowns. They were at home, and they still, lost the game. And yes, obviously it was a miracle at the very end. But I mean, Baltimore outplayed them. If you looked at the yards for the defense and the offense, it was just these return touchdowns were huge swings.
Yeah. And to spin it back for fantasy purposes here.
Oh, by the way, one thing, Mike, before you go on. I'm going to actually be betting that game because I'm in Vegas for the NFFC, and I'm getting up there Thursday because I'm going to host this Friday high-stakes league. It's a 10 grand buy-in for these guys. I'm going to be hosting that and then drafting my own team, not the 10 grand buy-in.
I was about to say that's chump change for Chris Liss.
He doesn't trifle such leagues. It's only six figures or bust for him.
Yeah, exactly.
A man of means.
Yeah, but to spin it back for fantasy purposes in Baltimore and Denver, I'm still distracted by $10,000 buy-in. Anyway, so I'm going to give you 2 groups of players, and I want to know who you think is going to score more fantasy points total. So for Baltimore, Ray Rice and Torrey Smith, and then for Denver, Ronnie Hillman and Demaryius Thomas. I mean, between that group, who do you think scores more points?
Rice and Smith, because I don't know what Hillman's going to do. I think you've got 2 holes versus one hole versus and a half at best in Hillman.
Then Chris?
Sorry, I missed the question. My crappy internet, for which I paid too much money, just crapped out. So what was it? Why isn't Google? Hey, this is Google. Build nationwide Wi-Fi. Everyone will buy that. Just put these guys out of business. Seriously, just build like a nationwide Wi-Fi. Charge whatever for it. I'm sure it'd be cheaper than the ridiculous internet I have now.
I'm sure there's a 3-letter government organization that's preventing them from doing that. But I mean,
they shouldn't be if it's But go ahead.
Yeah, I've written papers about that very subject. But anyway, Baltimore. So I'm giving you 2 groups of players who scores more points: Ray Rice and Torrey Smith versus Demaryius Thomas and Ronnie Hillman. Basically, the running back wide receiver combination for each team.
Give me the Baltimore ones because Hillman is so crappy. But if you go Monte Ball and Demaryius Thomas, I think that's a tough call. I'd probably still take Rice. Rice and Smith because I feel just more confident that those 2 guys are going to get touches. And I love Demaryius Thomas. I mean, I think he's a superstar receiver. I think he's like number 3 or 4 on my board, ahead of Brandon Marshall, ahead of Julio Jones. But I'm going to go with the Ravens guys.
Gotcha. All right, I'm going to try to roll through as many as we can here before time is up. So we'll transition now to New England at Buffalo. And so New England's coming into Buffalo with all these new fun pieces. Do we think that anything's really changed in Buffalo, or is it more the same old New England's going to win by 30 points?
The line, I believe, is like 9-ish. I think that's probably fair, given that EJ Manuel is probably going to be there, sort of gimpy and rusty against not necessarily ready for prime time. But in Buffalo, I think this game, I'll probably take the Bills. I don't know. I got to think about it. But I think the Patriots' offense is pretty smooth in this game, and they do win the game by 7 or so.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we don't know who's going to be the quarterback in Buffalo, and I think that's such a huge factor. I mean, there are unknowns in New England, but I think the unknowns that they have are a lot more replaceable than the ones that Buffalo has right now. If EJ Manuel plays, it's a tougher call. Jarius Byrd too is another one. He's got the plantar fasciitis, and you're trying to get a second opinion on that. No, that's the last thing you want to do is have a key member of your secondary out against New England.
Yeah, but if you're in IDP leagues, though, one guy, both Mario Puig, our IDP guy, and myself agree on in this case that's really rising up charts fast is Kiko Alonso in Buffalo, the middle linebacker. Been looking real good in preseason and workouts, and he can, especially against the high-powered offense, he may actually have an active role trying to tackle these guys. So someone to look out for in IDP circuits. But over under 50, do you see that? Do you see a lot of points being scored in that case, fantasy points as well?
I mean, it could be 41-7 for all we know. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm going to go 31 to. Now that I said the score, I'm going to go the other way on the spread. I don't like to commit to these spread picks. I got to write this article in the next couple of days. I don't want to, lock it in. In fact, I got angry in my East Coast offense draft. I'm like, you know what? No more best bet, no more survivor. I'm sick of picking these things on Tuesday before we even have the injury report out. I know people say, oh, my pool is due Wednesday. It's like, well, get another pool, man, because that's just stupid. Like, why would you want to have to commit to a pick before we have information about this week? And so I almost feel loath to like pick the scores right now. Because I don't even want to. I want to just be able to like get more info during the week. And it's what happens when you publish something and you try to say, okay, well, I can go back against that. Then you get into this torture where you're like, do I want to second guess myself or stick to? You don't even want to like go. You don't even want to like crystallize your decision until you have a little bit more information. So I'm going to say I think it's going to be around what Vegas's number is, around 50. For the Patriots, I really don't know how they're going to distribute. I'd be confident in Stephen Ridley. I'd be confident in Amendola. I would probably start Shane Vereen in the flex. For Buffalo, it's C.J. Spiller, and I might start Stevie Johnson with some confidence if E.J. Manuel's the guy. If Jeff Tuel's the guy, all bets are off. I think it's going to be disaster. But if E.J. Manuel's the guy, I think I would start Spiller and Stevie Johnson with reasonable confidence.
So another group of guys question here. Combination of Shane Vereen and Stephen Ridley versus C.J. Spiller in a PPR situation. Who scores more?
Ridley and Vereen. The combination.
But you can't start the combination. It's not team running back.
They take two. They take two slots. They take two slots. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but like you said though, you would start Vereen in a flex situation, and if you happen to, if you owned Ridley and Vereen, do you think they're going to outscore C.J. Spiller in this game? Is my question in a PPR situation.
Yeah, but if you have Spiller, then you put someone else in your flex.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. You get to put Spiller and then a wide receiver in your flex. I would say you want to ask Spiller and Jackson versus Vereen and Ridley. I'll go Vereen and Ridley.
Even still with Jackson?
Yeah, I'll go Vereen and Ridley over Spiller and Jackson this week. Yeah.
Spiller and Stevie Johnson with Jeff Tuel at quarterback. Now that would be more interesting, but still, even then.
Jeff Tuel. It's all bets are off. With Jeff Tuel,
Yeah, sorry, Chris. If it was EJ Manuel at quarterback, would you be more confident in both those two versus Ridley and Vereen?
I'm assuming EJ Manuel is going to play because he took reps with the first team this week. Okay, and even with EJ Manuel in there, I'd rather have Vereen and Ridley than Spiller and Jackson, just because the Bills' run defense has been very soft of late, and although I think they turned the corner. I can't remember if it was 2011 or 2012. At one point they turned a corner and they were tough for a few games. But New England's run defense is typically good. I still think Spiller will get his, especially if E.J. Manuel's the quarterback. But if you're going to have Ridley and Vereen on the more high-powered offense, I think I would have to do that.
Gotcha.
You know what? We're not going to have time to go through every game. But Chris is going to be doing Beating the Book this week, so make sure to check that out on rotowire.com. Before we all go, I want one guy you think is a guy that you're maybe targeting for this week. That is a fantasy guy that might be a guy that you would start ahead of where you normally would. We'll start with you, Mike, on this one. Who are you looking as a guy that stands out? This is a really good play this week.
So, I don't know. There's a couple guys for me, but one of the ones that really stands out for me would be if you have like Kenny Stills or Nick Toon. I'm not a believer in Atlanta secondary. They may be able to stop Marquise Colston, but that offense in New Orleans is so good. And one of those other two guys who I probably wouldn't start in normal situations, but if I get a read on who's actually going to see more of the targets with the information coming out later this week, that would be someone who's really low down who I'd be very interested in starting this week because I don't think Atlanta secondary is very good, and I actually see New Orleans scoring a ton of points this weekend.
I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, both teams there, absolutely, because I don't believe in New Orleans' defense as far as I can throw them. Interesting to note, though, Drew Brees had 2 mediocre at best games against Atlanta last year. So, I don't know if it carries over, but it is worth noting. My guy that's kind of a – go ahead, Chris. What were you going to say? I guess you weren't going to say. All right. My guy that I think is a guy –
Go ahead.
All right. The other guy that I think is interesting guy that could jump out this week, Kobe Fleener for the Colts. I know he's got to make sure his knee's 100% this week in practice, but I think he's an interesting, sneaky play for a tight end. I like the matchup against the Raiders.
I'll tell you a guy who's going to be started in every league, and I hate to say it, but I think he's going to have a big game, is DeMarco Murray. Because the Giants' best run defender is Jason Pierre-Paul, who's iffy with a back injury, and even if he's there, he's not going to be like 100%. Their linebackers are below average, and I think it's going to be a high-scoring game, and they've got a superstar corner in Prince Amukamara. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler this year, who's going to, I don't know if he can really check Dez Bryant, but it's not going to be, I don't think Dez Bryant's going to go crazy week one, but I do think Dallas' offense is going to move the ball, and I think DeMarco Murray is going to be a huge part of that.
Yeah, no Stevie Brown in that one. I think might benefit. I think Miles Austin might benefit. Everybody else might benefit from that. Amukamara they focus. If he does focus and lock in on Bryant, he just follows them all over the field. Then all these other secondary parts can be huge.
Yeah. I'm just shocked that Chris Liss went against his Giants in that and picking someone he thinks is going to break out.
He prefaced it with
I don't trust their defense. I don't trust their defense. I think the Giants can win that game. I think the offense is going to do well, but I think that the guy I'm worried about, I think DeMarco Murray is going to have a big game.
And just let that be a lesson to everyone. You win with your head and not with your heart in fantasy sports. Don't just pick with your favorite team. Just don't do it. Most likely you will not win.